Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Violent clashes broke out in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi early on Friday in the wake of a government decision to suspend European Union accession talks till 2028. Now, Georgian police used water cannon, pepper spray, and tear gas to disperse protesters who tried to force their way into the Georgian parliament. Now, several opposition politicians from the Coalition for Change have reportedly sustained injuries, including a broken nose and a broken hand. Georgia's relations with the EU deteriorated following the country's contested general elections and allegations of authoritarian measures and pro-Russian stance presented by the ruling party. According to a 2023 opinion poll by the International Republican Institute, some 89% of Georgians are in favor of joining the EU. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda has taken to social media to express his support for Georgia and its aspirations to join the European Union.
Lithuania stands firmly with the people of Georgia and their European dream. President Salome Zurabishvili, I wish you strength and courage in keeping Georgia on the European path. Georgia belongs in Europe.
Investigators looking into damage made 2 weeks ago to communication cables running under the Baltic Sea suspect that a Chinese ship deliberately cut it with its anchor, the Wall Street Journal reports. Now, investigators are now working to determine whether Russia was behind the suspected sabotage. The severed cable has already been repaired. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, a Chinese container ship carrying Russian fertilizers dropped its anchor near the first cut cable connecting Sweden and Lithuania and dragging it along the sea floor for more than 100 miles. As a result, it cut the second cable between Germany and Finland. Suspicious behavior such as speed reduction and turning off the transponder during the incident seems to rule out accidental causes of the event. Now, the ship set off from the Russian port of Ust-Luga on the Gulf of Finland on November 15th. The incidents occurred on November 17th and 18th. Russian President Vladimir Putin has hailed Trump as a smart and experienced person, and he stressed that the incoming U.S. president will find a solution to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Now, speaking at a press conference in Kazakhstan's Astana, the Russian head of state said Trump is not safe after he survived, quote-unquote, attempted murder, and more than once. Putin went on to praise the American president-elect as an intelligent person and expressed hope that Trump is cautious enough to understand the issue of his safety. Now, the Russian leader noted that during the presidential campaign, Trump was exposed to humiliating and unfounded legal charges, and he faced attacks on his family, which Putin described as something even bandits wouldn't do.
Some disarmament, some...
I think one of the paradoxes of diplomacy is rather depressing. If you've got a situation where there's been intense fighting and someone comes along talking about a peace plan, the fighting intensifies. This is what British Ambassador to Poland, Charles Crawford, said in an interview with TVP World.
I think I just want to mention that one of the paradoxes of diplomacy, a rather depressing paradox of diplomacy, is if you've got a situation like this where there's been intense fighting and someone comes along talking about a peace plan, the fighting intensifies because everyone wants to grab a little bit more so they've got more to trade at the negotiating table. So it's no surprise that the fighting's intensifying. I just somehow myself hope that we've done enough to help Ukraine fight back and, make Russia pay a price for that escalation. I think there are ways in which diplomacy can finesse outcomes, which, to maybe people who aren't experts look a bit fishy and unsatisfactory, but nonetheless it can be done. So it's possible that Ukraine, in a sense, loses de facto control over part of its territory, but it doesn't lose what the lawyers call de jure control. In other words, that territory will still stay part of Ukraine for international law purposes. And we did that with the Baltic states. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were never recognized, certainly by the UK, as a legal part of the Soviet Union. Even
but they spent what 50 years under the Soviet yoke.
Absolutely, but the point is, then they re-emerged, and so these diplomatic solutions can actually drag on for decades, as we've seen in plenty of examples. So it doesn't follow that Ukraine will necessarily symbolically lose the land as well as actually losing the land. But in return for that loss, which is clearly pretty disastrous on many levels, Ukraine, I think, would get tremendous Western support and would get tremendous military backup, so that if anything like this happened again, it would be much, much harder for Russia to take any more. Now, I can see why Ukraine would think, well, okay, Russia's got this bit, they'll just wait for 20 years and come back for the next bit. But even within that deal, you can imagine sanctions staying on Moscow, and Moscow being given some clear incentives to sort of back off for the foreseeable future. And maybe that's the best outcome. I'm not saying it's a good outcome.
Right.
I'm just saying maybe it's the best one we've got.
Now, the full episode of On the Record is now available on our TVP World YouTube channel, and we encourage you to head on over to that and watch it. 6 Russian and 5 Chinese military aircraft entered South Korea's air defense identification zone on Friday. Now, Seoul responded by scrambling fighter jets to protect its airspace. Now, in a statement, the Chinese Defense Ministry said that the joint aerial patrol over the Sea of Japan on Friday was based on an annual plan of bilateral military cooperation. Now, it was the 9th joint strategic aerial patrol between the two countries since 2019. The last one was held in July. Now, the July operation took place in international airspace and was intercepted by the U.S. and Canada. China then issued a statement saying that such patrols were not aimed at any third party, in line with international practice, and were unrelated to the current international and regional situation. Moving on now to the world of sports. Well, Polish tennis star Iga Świątek has posted a video statement on social media explaining that she has accepted a 1-month suspension after testing positive for a banned substance. Now, Świątek said the positive test was a result of contaminated melatonin tablets from Poland, which the player was taking for jet lag and sleep problems.
World number 2 Iga Świątek took to Instagram to announce that she has accepted a 1-month ban after testing positive for the banned substance trimetazidine, TMZ, in August of 2024. Świątek described the ordeal of testing positive as the worst experience of her life.
I hope you will stand by me and will keep supporting me, because I'm not sure if without my supporters, I would have been able to find the strength to carry on and keep fighting. So now I have fought the toughest battle of my life, and I hope you will stay with me and keep supporting me.
According to Świątek's team, trace amounts of the banned substance entered her body via contaminated melatonin. The best Polish tennis player uses the drug frequently to ease the effects of jet lag and help her sleep. The drug is regulated in Poland and readily available as an over-the-counter medicine.
The ITIA accepts that the positive test was caused by contamination by a regulated non-prescription medication, melatonin, manufactured and sold in Poland that the player had been taking for jet lag and sleep issues, and that the violation was therefore not intentional.
In a statement, the Polish Tennis Association said it stands together with Iga Świątek in her doping issues.
The Polish Tennis Association fully supports Iga Świątek in this difficult moment of her career, knowing how important the principles of fair competition and the spirit of fair play have always been to her. It is also worth appreciating how she had the courage to inform the public in such a transparent and detailed way about the situation.
The case of the second-best female tennis player in the world was left undisclosed to the wider public for 2.5 months at ITIA's request. As a result of the investigation and decision by ITIA, Świątek missed 3 WTA tournaments in Asia. Her violation, however, was small enough for ITIA to consider her 22-day temporary suspension as part of the ban. Therefore, Świątek will be able to compete again from December the 4th onwards.
Moving on now to Romania, where thousands of young people gathered in Bucharest for the 4th consecutive night to protest the Constitutional Court's decision to recount votes in recent presidential elections. Now, students kept chanting, "Don't take our freedom," saying they want change and not a recount. Now, people in the Romanian capital took to the streets again to demonstrate the court's order and the independent candidate, Călin Georgescu. They intend to protest every night and remind their parents and grandparents to go out and vote as well. Now, banners held by demonstrators read "No fascism, no war, no Georgescu" in the second round. and people tell you in chorus, do not vote for a dictator. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, some 20 people stood in front of the National Theatre to support the anti-NATO and anti-EU candidate. France's minority government might fall next week amid a feud over the 2025 austerity budget, which is currently being proceeded in the parliament. Now, the potential collapse would send shockwaves across the Eurozone, fueling financial instability. Now, Michel Barnier's government could see a no-confidence vote over its plans for spending cuts and tax hikes aimed at bringing in 60 billion euros to rein in the country's runaway deficit. On Thursday, Barnier abandoned his plan to increase electricity tax in a key concession made to appease the far right, which threatened to bring down the government should it fail to ease the burden on the working class. Now, the fall would push the country into its second political turmoil this year after the June snap election led to a hung parliament. NATO needs to deal with various scenarios against its security and defense measures, security analyst Jacek Robo said in an interview for TVP World. Now, he added that military actions targeting infrastructure and people are the key priority at the moment, but the allies shouldn't forget about other forms of Russian sabotage. Let's take a listen.
Russia is using their intelligence services. I'm not talking about the classical form of espionage. This is something which is well known and well described in our books and also in the debates about Russian activities against West. I'm talking mostly about some secret operations against our critical infrastructure, against our industry, against also, for instance, some situation in the media domain or info domain. So there is, of course, some hybrid types of actions when you have a combination of Russian armed forces or Russian intel and also some different actors like the hacker groups.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has wrapped up his visit to Kazakhstan, where he took part in the regular CSTO meeting in the country's capital. Now, the editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post, Bogdan Nahailo, discussed the current Moscow-Astana relations in an interview with TVP World.
Tokambayev has also, on several occasions, made it very clear that whereas he sees Kazakhstan still as a partner, as an ally of Russia, for example, on the issue of Russia's war against Ukraine, Kazakhstan takes its own position, implicitly of a neutral one, always stressing the need for a peaceful solution and not really playing along with the narratives and with the messages that the Kremlin is sending. I think what we have to remember, look, is still the dependence of Kazakhstan on Russia, no longer cultural, linguistic, political. It's still an economic one. Kazakhstan is a very rich oil-producing country, and roughly 80% of its exports go via Russia. So they have to behave in a sense, and they have to play along with Russia for economic reasons, for pragmatic reasons.
And that's all for this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.